Welcome to this deep dive where we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting. Can robots truly replace human connection?
Mm.
It's a question a lot of people are asking these days.
Yeah, especially with all the advancements in AI.
Right. And we're going to be looking at this question through a really unique lens. Autism support? We're diving into an article by Jamie Horrocks. They're an autistic author and also have a PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
So Horrocks wrote this article that kind of weaves together their own dystopian fiction with a meta-analysis of research on robots and autism.
Interesting.
It really is. So the fiction is this collection called Liminal Echoes. And get this, the meta-analysis looked at 142 research papers.
Wow, 142. That's a lot.
I know, right? It seems like everyone's thinking about this. So in Liminal Echoes, Horrocks paints this picture of a world where people are living increasingly isolated lives. They're in these sterile virtual environments. And all the relationships are basically simulated.
It sounds kind of bleak.
It's definitely dystopian. But it makes you think, right,
Uh-huh.
about our own world. With the rise of AI and virtual reality, are we headed in that direction?
Yeah, it's like that question, is technology connecting us or isolating us?
Exactly. And Horrocks uses this really interesting character in the book, the observer. This character's consciousness is actually derived from an autistic host.
Oh, wow. So they're exploring this from like an inside perspective.
Yeah, and the observer is constantly yearning for authentic connection. But in this sterile, tech-dominated world, it's hard to find.
I can see why that would be a struggle.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Mhm.
That yearning that the observer feels, it's kind of mirrored in what's happening in the actual research world. There's this growing movement to use robots as mentors or even therapists.
For autistic individuals.
Yep. And it's not just a few studies. And remember, there are 142 papers on this.
That's a lot of people looking into that.
It is. And it really made me think about something Horrocks argues in their article. They say this research seems to be based on a kind of flawed assumption that autistic people actually prefer interacting with predictable systems, like robots.
Rather than dealing with the complexities of human relationships.
Right. Like we're assuming they'd rather have a robot friend than a human one.
And that seems like a pretty big assumption to make.
It does. And it's kind of dehumanizing, don't you think?
Yeah, it is like we're saying autistic people aren't capable of real connection.
Exactly. And Horrocks really hits on that point. They say it reduces autistic individuals to subjects who need fixing, instead of seeing them as people who deserve genuine understanding and connection.
It's like we're trying to program robots to teach autistic people how to behave.
Exactly. And when you put it like that, it sounds pretty messed up.
It does.
And this whole thing, the sheer number of studies, it raises some ethical questions too, right?
For sure.
I mean, 142 studies focused on using technology to essentially modify behavior.
It makes you wonder about the potential for harm.
It does.
Like one study proposed using robots to teach autistic children eye contact. While the intention might be to help them navigate social situations, it also kind of prioritizes conformity over understanding, you know?
Yeah, like, why might an autistic person not make eye contact in the first place?
Right, exactly.
We're trying to change who they are rather than appreciating their unique way of being.
Absolutely. And that brings us to Horrocks' personal experience as an autistic person. They have both hyperempathy and alexithymia. Just to clarify for our listeners, hyperempathy means you might feel overwhelmed by other people's emotions.
Okay.
While alexithymia makes it hard to identify and express your own feelings.
Oh, wow. So they're navigating a world where they're both super sensitive to others and also struggling to process their own emotions.
Exactly, and that makes their perspective on robotic interactions all the more powerful.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
They talk about the disorientation they feel in those interactions, the lack of what they call energy exchange. Imagine trying to have a conversation with someone who's mirroring your words and gestures perfectly, but there's no spark of humanity there.
It'd be like talking to a really advanced chatbot.
Exactly.
It'd still feel like something was missing.
You got it. And for autistic individuals who might rely on those subtle cues and that energetic connection, it creates this sense of dissonance and emptiness.
Wow, so it's not just about the words, it's about the energy behind them.
Exactly. It's about that intangible something that makes us human.
And that's something robots just can't replicate.
At least not yet. It's kind of like we're missing the bigger picture, you know?
Hmm.
Like, Horrocks argues this whole research trend reflects a deeper misunderstanding of autism.
Oh yeah, how so?
Instead of celebrating neurodiversity, we keep focusing on deficits.
Like we're trying to fit everyone into the same mold.
Right, exactly. Like
Yeah.
saying, okay, everyone needs to be
And
neurotypical.
if you're not, then you need to be fixed.
Yeah, it's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Instead of just appreciating the square peg for what it is.
Exactly.
And Horrocks contrasts this with like real human connection, which thrives on imperfection and vulnerability,
Oh,
right?
it's about accepting people for who they are, not who we want them to be.
And isn't it interesting that autistic individuals often embody the very qualities needed for deep connection?
Absolutely.
Like they're sensitive to energy shifts, they engage authentically,
They're not afraid to be themselves.
and yet we try to mold them into something they're not.
It's almost like we're afraid of genuine connection, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like we're scared of the vulnerability and the unpredictability.
So we turn to technology,
We want that sanitized, controlled version of interaction.
like a robot that's always predictable.
Exactly.
And Horrocks calls this the commodification of care.
It's like we're saying, hey, loneliness, here's a robot companion to fix that.
But it feels so empty, doesn't it?
It does.
It made me think about what Horrocks said about those personal items, like plushies and squishmallows.
Oh, yeah, those soft, tactile things. They might seem insignificant to some people.
But for autistic individuals, they can hold so much meaning.
Right. Like
Yeah.
they represent memories.
Mhm.
Or provide comfort, a sense of connection to a specific person or experience.
And robots just can't replicate that.
They don't have that lived experience.
The emotional depth.
It's like, think about science fiction.
So often, robots are the antagonists,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Rebelling against their creators.
There's that underlying fear of AI becoming a threat.
But then in real life, we're totally fine with the idea of robots caring for our kids,
Or teaching our students.
providing companionship for the elderly.
It's kind of a weird paradox, isn't it?
It is.
We're drawn to stories that warn us about AI, but we're also quick to embrace its potential to fix or improve people.
And it all comes back to that question. Are we sacrificing genuine human connection for the sake of control?
Especially when it comes to supporting autistic individuals.
Right. Shouldn't we be embracing neurodiversity?
Creating a world where everyone feels seen and heard and valued.
Instead of focusing on fixing what we perceive as deficits.
Horrocks' work really makes you think differently about autism, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not a disorder to be cured. It's a different way of being. A way of being that brings its own unique gifts to the world.
And that's a powerful message for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we go from here? Like after this deep dive into Horrocks' work and all this research, what's the takeaway?
For me, it's really about remembering the value of human connection. Technology is amazing, you know, but it can't replace those real human interactions.
It makes you wonder if we're getting a little too tech reliant,
Mm-hmm.
looking for quick fixes to these complex human problems.
Right, like in education and healthcare, even in things like companionship.
Are we losing something important along the way?
I think that's what Horrocks is getting at with that dystopian story, you know? It's like a warning sign. What happens if we keep replacing human interaction with technology?
We end up isolated with our robots.
Exactly, our needs might be met, but there's no real sense of belonging.
No shared humanity.
And it made me think about those personal items Horrocks talked about.
The plushies, the squishmallows.
They represent a kind of connection that goes beyond just function.
It's emotional, it's sensory, it's tied to memories.
And robots just can't replicate that no matter how advanced they get.
So it's not about rejecting technology outright, but using it in a way that enhances our lives.
Right, not diminishes them.
We have to ask ourselves, is this technology serving us or are we serving it?
Especially when it comes to supporting autistic individuals.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Every autistic person is unique with their own strengths and challenges.
We need to shift our focus from fixing deficits to embracing neurodiversity.
Creating a world where autistic individuals feel accepted and supported, empowered to be themselves.
Like Horrocks says, autism isn't a disorder to be cured. It's a different way of being. A way of being that brings its own gifts to the world.
That's a powerful message.
It really is.
The future doesn't have to be dystopian. We have a choice.
We can choose to embrace diversity, value human connection, and use technology in a way that lifts us up.
Without losing sight of what makes us human.
It's a call to be more mindful, more empathetic, more intentional about the world we're creating.
Think about how you connect with others. Are you truly present in those interactions? Are you trying to understand different perspectives?
Because those moments of genuine connection, That's where we find the real meaning of life.
It's where we discover who we truly are.
That's a great note to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.